Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let me know.
My Bigfoot sightings began 12 years ago on Vancouver Island. My name is William Bruce Conway. I live in the Pacific Northwest, where I've been for over 40 years. My first sighting actually happened when I was on a week-long horse trip in Colorado in the White River National Forest, and that was in the mid-1980s. And we got to a really high area up on horseback up there, and we noticed that there were three very large pines or fir trees that had been ripped out of the ground and planted upside down, so the roots were up in the air. And it was really dramatic. They were in an area where you were definitely going to see them when you went into the valley. And I think it was more or less of a signpost and a warning for the Bigfoot or the Sasquatches that lived in that area. Yeah, it was really, really shocking to see that. And we didn't see anything else. We didn't see any shelters or any sign of the Sasquatch. But the first time I actually saw one with my own eyes, I saw a juvenile in Port Townsend. This is about 8 years ago. And it had been hanging around the garden like a lot of them. There was a drought that had gone on for 3 or 4 years, and it forced a lot of the Sasquatches down out of the Olympic Peninsula. And they started coming down into Port Townsend and other places along the green belts and raiding gardens. And, you know, this is the kind of thing that you'd think it was really terrifying, but it's more like the local kids stealing apples. You know, I mean, once you get used to these, your neighbors who happen to be much larger and hairier, you find they have a sense of humor. You find you almost never see them, but you always know they're there. You hear them a lot. You know, we've been hearing them. There's a family here on the island, family of Sasquatches. My neighbor who lives closest to him thinks that there's a male, but I've only heard the female and the kids squabbling in the distance, and they're pretty loud, like youngsters are, and they must feel fairly safe there because they come back year after year. Sasquatches are often seen swimming to San Juan Island and out in the waters around San Juan Island, because we're only a few nautical miles from Vancouver Island, so it's a short distance. They're known to be really good swimmers. Let's see, backtracking to when I had my first main encounter on Vancouver Island 12 years ago. I was where I wasn't supposed to be, and I didn't know that really. I didn't know anything about the Forbidden Plateau or the fact that the Native Americans up there are very respectful of that boundary. I didn't know about some of the other stuff that's happened in that neighborhood. There was a very famous kidnapping of a hunter that occurred in that neighborhood back about 80 or 90 years ago. And he was kidnapped for over a week with his family, and managed to escape by feeding the papa a plug of tobacco and getting him sick. Anyhow, that's a well-known story in Vancouver Island, and the First Nation people who live on the island have many, many stories about all the encounters that happen up there. They say there's over 3,000 Sasquatches living on Vancouver Island. And I didn't know any of this when I was wandering up a tributary of the Gold River. I sort of lost track of time, spent a few extra hours, and when I realized it was getting sort of late in the afternoon, that's when I heard something crunching about maybe 50 or 60 feet away from me, maybe a little further, about 100 feet. At first, I thought the sound was that of an elk, and I got really nervous because they're very dangerous, and when you startle them, they tend to attack you. And so I wanted to get the heck out of there. I was all the way down in the stream bed, looking for quartz crystals, and so I turned around and ran straight up the steep bank of the tributary, and when I crested up over the top, something hit me in the backpack. Something went ding and hit me, and I looked up and I saw the thing fly over top of me. It sort of bounced off my backpack, fell in front of me, and I saw that it was a crystal. It was a quartz crystal. So I mean, when this kind of stuff happens to you, you don't really know what to think. First thing I thought is, oh man, I must be on a reservation. Somebody doesn't like me being there. I better get the heck out of here, And I grabbed this crystal and I started hoofing it. And as I turned around to sort of look at what was behind me, I got hit by this wave of, now I know it's called infrasound. And it's this unbelievable, it's like projected fear. It's a super hard emotion to experience and to deal with without just getting terrified and running. It's almost like you go from 0 to 60, from totally okay to absolutely terrified in just a fraction of a second. And it hits you viscerally in the chest. That's where it hit me. And it makes your guts go all watery. It's so scary. But anyhow, at this point, I was running about as fast as I've ever run in my life, and I spent a good probably an hour and a half to 2 hours getting out of there. Getting back to where my truck was parked near Gold River. And then I ended up going into Gold River and trying to get a little bite to eat. And their only cafeteria that was there. And I talked to a couple of the locals, and while I was chatting with them, the local deputy or constable came over and sat down. And one of the guys said, "Hey, he's got a Sasquatch story." And the constable goes, "Oh yeah, tell me." And so I told him basically what had happened, and he goes, "Oh, interesting. Well, I have only 2 things to say to you. One is, don't go back up there. You're not supposed to go up there. And the second thing is, don't ever go back up there again." And he wouldn't really go into any detail about it. But anyhow, that was a pretty direct experience. And I didn't really see the Sasquatch because it was concealed behind a copse of trees. But, I heard this crunch, 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 and I certainly felt it when it hit my backpack with the crystal. So anyhow, that was a pretty interesting story. But I have one that's even better. Here's a story that sort of got me much deeper into the whole culture of Sasquatch and the history, and really opened my eyes as to what was going on in this area. I am a longtime book publisher, and I've done a lot of alternative publishing and activist publishing. But about, I would say 15 years ago, I got a call from somebody that I knew a little bit. Her name was Jean Hendrickson. And I knew she was a conscious channel and had done some publishing, had written a couple of other books. So I was interested in talking to her about her experiences and what she might want to do with the book. And the title of the book is We All Have a Purpose for Being Here, a memoir by Jean Hendrickson. We finished the book while she was in her last months in a convalescent center. And it was a lot of work to get it to the point that it is now. But the stories that she told me during that time just opened my eyes so much about the history of Sasquatches and the connection with them and us, how we are related, why they stay away from us, how they can disappear from us, and, how they're masters of disguise and camouflage. But the most interesting thing was that Jean Hendrickson began communicating telepathically with the shaman who was a female shaman in the Sasquatch tribe up on Vancouver Island. And some of the stories about those communications are in this book, We All Have a Purpose for Being Here. This went on for a number of years, and it got to the point where she would communicate, she would talk to students and would actually channel the Sasquatch elder right during the session. And when she would do it, apparently she would get taller and her face would change and it would take on more of a Neanderthal look, and she could actually channel the voices of these Sasquatches during the reading. So this was really a fascinating thing to be part of, a project to be part of. I do believe the book is still on sale on Amazon, but I'm not positive about that. I saw it still listed. Oh yeah, they have used copies for $66.98, so it must be out of print. Anyhow, that story really got me going about connecting with the local Sasquatches and how much they do need to be in contact with a few human brethren to keep abreast of what's going on in our world, because what's going on in our world really affects what's going on in their world. And what I've heard from First Nation people up in Canada is that, especially in Vancouver Island, is that once or twice a generation, there will be a hybrid will be made. And that hybrid is raised in the human world and has all the communication abilities with the Sasquatch, is able to communicate equally with humans or Sasquatches. And that person becomes sort of a liaison, a spiritual liaison with their community and with the Sasquatch community. Pretty interesting story. I didn't think too much about it other than it was just fascinating. And a couple of years back, I met a guy here on the island who is quite acrobatic. And he is in the local pirate parade swinging from the yardarms on a rope the whole time this parade float is moving. Anyhow, it turned out he's one of these people. And when you meet him, you can really believe it because of the way the hair grows on his face and how his fingers are cone-shaped, like a gorilla's. They're really, really thick at the base, and then they come to a very fine point. And just really interesting that this is a possibility. So, as you can tell, because of these stories, I live in an area where the Sasquatch culture is fairly rich and fairly deep. We have had a lot of things happen in this area, and a lot of sightings, a lot of history, and I think there's quite a bit of tolerance now. People just sort of accept that there's Sasquatches in the neighborhood, just like here on the island. They joke about it when they hear them, off in the distance. And there's a lot of limestone on the island, so there's a lot of limestone caverns and caves. Most have been closed up, but I have a feeling the Sasquatch family knows where there's a couple little pockets that are still available. That's close to Roach Harbor on San Juan Island, in the old limestone quarries. I'm focusing entirely on Sasquatch tonight because it's such a dear topic to my heart. I feel like ever since I worked with Gene Hendrickson, I've been able to communicate with them from a distance. I find that they're never too far from my mind, and whenever I hear a story of an encounter between Sasquatch and human, there's a part of me that knows if it's true or if it's not. It's sort of like, oh, that's a nice story, but I'm not buying it, especially if it's different than my own experience. Now, I don't have a breadth of experience. I don't have, a whole lifetime of associating with these creatures, but the experience that I do have with them makes me A, believe 100% that they exist, B, that as interested as they are in humanity, they don't want to have a whole lot to do with us. I think some of that could be health aspects, and also I think we've been very violent to them in the past, and have done a lot of shooting at Sasquatches, and so I think that they have very good reasons to stay away from us. But I do also believe spiritually that we're approaching a point of view, and this is the message that I get from them, is that they now need us and we need them. What's happening in the world right now and the transformation that's going on, they're going to need us to get through it, and we're going to need them. That's the message I'm getting loud and clear from them. So, yeah, and I feel they're part of my family now. I feel like we're distant cousins. I don't think of them any different than somebody who lives in the woods, who's a little rough, who's somebody that is a good person, but also somebody that has their own philosophy on life and who you are. So I tend to follow their lead. If they don't want to be seen, I don't go looking for them. If they don't want to be photographed or any of their stuff to be photographed, like their little wigwams that they build or anything like that, I don't photograph it. I try to respect them as people, because for me, they're the people of the forest. And I hope as I get older, I am able to have a better relationship with them. I've heard so many stories around here of them, of especially the juveniles, interfacing with people a lot more frequently than the adults do. My partner, Wendy, was out in the warm rain in Port Townsend and was, how should we say this? She was relieving herself and heard something behind her, turned around, and there was a 7-foot tall juvenile, skinny as a beanpole, covered in hair, but looking more human than Sasquatch, which is what they're like when they're juveniles. And he was tree peeping. He would look out, pop his head out, pop it back. And I was in the house and I felt him. I felt him out there. So I came to the door and I said, "Hey, honey, you might want to come in." She goes, "Yeah, I really do. There's something out here." And I said, "Yeah, come on in." So she came in and I said, "Honey, I think it was a Sasquatch and I think it was a juvenile." And she goes, "I saw it. I saw it as I turned around. It kept looking at me from behind the tree." So we took the biggest, best apple we had and we left it out there for it as a little food offering. And came out the next day and it was gone. Don't know if it got it or if deer got it, but that happened right over in Port Townsend, Washington. So, there's a whole big community supposed to be up in the Olympic Mountains in Hurricane Ridge. There's supposed to be thousands of them up there. There's supposed to be 3,000 on Vancouver Island. And there used to be 4 to 5,000 at Mount St. Helens, in the caves all around Mount St. Helens. But many, many, many of them died when that occurred. And I think that might be a story that I can focus on a little bit because I had firsthand experience with it. And it was quite an event. Let's see, when did Mount St. Helens go? It went in 1990, 1980. I think it was 1980 it went. And at the time I was living in a community where there was a teacher there. His name was Yuntang, and he was one of the teachers, and he had been blown up in the Bay of Pigs as an underwater explosives expert for the Navy SEALs. He was a underwater demolition expert. That's it. And he got blown up and injured and was put on sort of permanent military disability. And he lived a life aside from society for a long time. He lived in the Tibetan Buddhist communities. He became a Lama. But one day I was talking to him, and we were talking about Mount St. Helens, and he told me the story. Oh my gosh. Wow, what a story. You know, you hear this through a lot of channels, but he experienced this firsthand. And what it was is he was like pretty much pulled out of his retirement against his will and put to work doing heavy equipment driving in Mount St. Helens, trying to dig the infrastructure back out and get the roads going, and sort of go in and do disaster mitigation. And he said that they paid him amazing amounts of money to do it. They had the best food. They had all these incentives for people to be there and do that because it was hard work. He said he was there about a week when he became aware of a tent. There was apart from all the other triage tents. And these were hospital tents, big white hospital tents. And this one was a good mile or a mile and a half away from all the rest of them and had guards, and they put a fence up around it and everything. And occasionally he would see these people coming out in these white robes, and they had their heads covered and their bodies covered. You couldn't see their faces or anything. He said the remarkable thing is they were all really big. He would see them from a distance, but they were obviously very large. And that is the extent of what he knew about, from his firsthand observation. Since then, a number of people who were firefighters and who were first responders and people in the military and National Guard, and all these people who were involved, started leaking stories about what they found. And, they concurred with what Yuntan had told me, that, that there had been this MASH tent for Sasquatches. That's what everybody believed. They were warned away. They weren't told anything about it. They were just told not to ask questions and to stay away. And the story that came out from other sources and from other people who had been involved is that one Sasquatch who was really badly burned, and he was a good 9 foot Sasquatch, stumbled into the main hospital tent area and collapsed. And at first they thought this was a human being because all his hair had been burned off. But he had been severely burned. He had second and third degree burns over, a good portion of his body. They got him a little bit triaged. They got him sort of stabilized, got some IV fluids in him, and he's immediately pulling the needles out and, requesting an interpreter using sign language. So they found a local Native American who knew Native American Sign Language, and apparently this is a way that Sasquatches communicate when they're trading and when they're trying to communicate information to people. And so what was conveyed is that he desperately needed help. He needed help for his people. He knew he was dying, but he needed to lead rescuers back to the base of Mount St. Helens, where all the caves were, where the Sasquatches community had been there for generations and generations and generations. Who knows how long? Anyhow, when the Mount St. Helens erupted, many of them lost their lives, but there were also survivors, and the burnt Sasquatch, the male that came in, led a rescue team back, and they spent days rescuing different Sasquatches and putting some out of their misery because they were so badly injured and hurt. So that's the story. That's the story that came down, from my friend Yuntan, and also from other sources and other whistleblowers. And it's one that I really do believe, because we just recently moved our tuna fleet down to the Columbia River, from Anacortes, Washington, down to the Columbia River, and that is a place that's very Sasquatch aware. Everywhere you turn, there are Sasquatch signs, and people have Sasquatch bumper stickers, and it's really close to Mount St. Helens, within about maybe 40 or 50 miles. So I think by living down there and living on the water, we're going to have more experiences in the future. So anyhow, that's about the most that I can come up with now. I hope to have more experiences and more communications with Sasquatch family, with the people of the forest. I will stay out of their territory unless I'm invited. I will not try to get photographs of them or try to expose them in any way to where they might be harmed. These creatures are real. They're our distant cousins, and I'll tell you what, they watch us all the time. They see us all the time. We can barely see them. Whether they are masters of camouflage, or can actually disappear, or can teleport, like a lot of people say. There'll be Sasquatch footprints, and then they'll just disappear in the snow. They'll just go and then they're gone. Anyhow, they're a species that's been around a lot longer than human Homo sapiens. We've been around who knows how long, maybe 50,000 years to 500,000 years. They've been around for millions of years. So anyhow, they're our brothers. I love them, but I will stay out of their way if that's what they want.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah, the sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking eight bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Some call it backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Some call it backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Going backwards in double time. Looking at the soul in the drummer, low Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down home, rhythm ride, chicken porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.